I too would like to acknowledge that I'm presenting today on Wadawurrung land. This is your body. We are inspired by their example of connection, knowledge sharing, and storytelling. We pay our respects to elders past and present and share with them our kindness and joy. This is going to let me, here we go. So I want to start by getting you into the mind of a teenager or a young person this morning. Right now, for many, they're being woken up by a blaring alarm. They quickly turn off their alarm, they might hit snooze. And for a lot of them, the first thing they're going to open on their phone is Snapchat to check if their friend has replied to their message from the night before. When you open up Snapchat, the first thing that pops up is your face, right? In the moment that they're waking up, they're being confronted with their own appearance. This is going to happen another 40 times throughout the course of the day as they continue to check their Snapchat. Never has there been a generation that is so familiar with their own appearance. I was in high school from 2007 to 2012. And in that time, I didn't get an iPhone until I think I was in year 10. And at the time, social media, really Instagram, was just used to like edit your photos and then you would post them on Facebook. The only people that you would follow were your friends and your family. And influencer culture as it exists today just didn't exist at the time. My influences around food and body really did come from my family. It came from messages that were plastered on the front cover of magazines of people who were, on weight loss journeys, before and after shots, and really small bodies that were portrayed in the movies and TV shows that I was watching in the noughties and in the 90s. Just say that my distaste for my changing body during adolescence was not born off of something that came from myself. It was definitely coming from external influences. So This Is Your Body was born off of my own personal experience, which I will share with you shortly. But the thing I want to highlight from the start really is that my story is not unique because so many young people struggle with their body image and with their relationship with food. In fact, this year, the Butterfly Foundation released its Body Kind Youth Survey, and they have found that 95% of young people report some level of body image concern, that 77% of Australian young people experience body image distress, that is like severe distaste for their body and their changing body. 40% that have experienced eating disorders are male, so it is not just a female-led issue. And 78% of young people wish they were leaner, with 71% wishing that they were more muscular. So when we've got these numbers, we know that we are in the midst of an issue that we need to do something about. And I'm hoping that today, after this session, you're left with some really practical strategies that you can take with you into the school community. Now, if you are getting ready for work, you're in the car, whatever the case might be, I have put together an ebook for following this presentation as well that you will receive that goes through all the key issues that we discuss and the strategies all written down for you as well. So don't feel like you need to take notes throughout the course of this, and the recording will be available to you as well. So I did want to tell you a little bit of a story because I think it does paint the picture of why I care so much about young people and their relationship with food and body. I definitely didn't think that I was going to be a nutritionist at all. I actually really wanted to be a dancer. When I was little, I was obsessed with the Wiggles and High Five and convinced I was going to be one of their backup dancers until when I was 12, I had a bit of an experience which really shaped the way that I felt about myself and my body. And it meant that I didn't want to dance anymore. So when I was 12, I was competing in a competition, and there were about 15 of us in our dance group, and we were told to like line up in height order to get fitted for our costumes. And I was really, really short. So I went and stood with the girls that were my height, and the teacher said, "Angelica, that costume will never ever fit you. Go and stand with the tall girls." And I was made to go stand with girls that were 2 heads taller than me, much older than me. I was just absolutely humiliated and decided in that moment that dance just really wasn't going to bring me joy anymore, and that my body was really a problem. When I was at school, I was one of those kids that just tried everything. That was my first day of year 7. I went to St. Columba's College in Essendon, and I tried everything. Played the flute. I was very academic. I did debating. I did pretty much everything but sport, to be honest with you. Just wasn't that way inclined. I was more of a hindrance on a team. But I did do dance through the school and really enjoyed it because it was much more inclusive. And I remember in year 9, we had to do subject selection for year 11 and 12. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I did all the quizzes that we had to do in careers and then went home and I said to mum and dad, I'm like, what should I do with my life? And they said to me, well, you never stop talking. So maybe becoming a lawyer or a journalist would probably suit you quite well. And I was like, all right, sure. So I aimed for that. And then when I finished school, did get into law school. I maintained a very healthy relationship with my body for most of high school. When I was in year 11, I did dabble with wanting to change my body because the fashion very much at the time was geared toward these really tight hugging clothes that made me feel very self-conscious, but didn't have the foresight at the time to realize that I didn't have to necessarily wear those clothes. I thought I did have to conform. But when I finished school, I got into law school and just started to really enjoy it. I really liked being at university, and halfway through the degree was given this opportunity to go and study in America. So I took it. And when I got back from that trip, things changed quite a bit for me because suddenly I was in a much smaller body and I started getting compliments on my body for the first time. Being complimented on my body after that experience that I had when I was 12 really solidified that maybe I would be more liked, accepted, and appreciated if I stayed in that smaller body. And that wasn't a body that came naturally to me. That was a body that required a lot of restriction and, really disengaging from the people in my life in pursuit of thinness. And that was particularly sad for me because I am Italian on both sides of my family, and food really has been at the center of my life always. And it created a real wedge between that. So this is my nonna Antonietta making casatini, and then this is my nonna Rosa. And one of my earliest memories is kneeling up at the bench at my nonna's house and making gnocchi with her and rolling out like hundreds and hundreds of them to feed our ever-growing family. And when I was unwell and not taking care of myself, it really disconnected me from them. The other issue that I was facing at the time as well was social media was really starting to pick up, particularly YouTube at the time, because TikTok just didn't exist. And there would be these videos online where people would share what they were eating and how they looked. And I was following all of this false information online, not realizing at the time that it was false because I was very impressionable. And it was very, very challenging. And when I realized that, there was a way that you could accept your body and that food is so important to taking care of yourself, I knew I wanted to spread that message to young people, but I wasn't going to do so without a qualification. So I decided at that point to graduate from law and arts and then go back to university to get my Bachelor of Health Sciences so that I could help young people to appreciate, celebrate the body that they're in, and then started This Is Your Body after that. Now, there are two key things I took away from my study of nutrition that I want to share with you this morning. One is just how incredible our bodies are. Our bodies do so much for us every single moment of the day. Our body's sole goal is keeping us alive. That is what our bodies want to do, right? So right now in this moment, you might be sitting down and your abdominal muscles might be keeping you sitting up. Your eyes might be focused on the screen. Your ears might be either listening to me, listening to what's happening outside, or whatever else is happening around you. Your digestive system might be digesting your breakfast or processing the food that you might be eating right now. Your immune system could be fighting off anything that's happening around you to make sure that you don't get sick. There are so many things that our body does for us every single moment. And really, when we look at what, when the focus is on what we look like, it's actually not really honoring just how incredible our bodies are. The other thing that I learned that was really important that I always tell the young people that I present to about is that the way that our bodies look, move, and feel is so different because we are biochemically unique. Even if we came from like the same set of birth parents and we have siblings, we are biochemically unique. This means that even if we ate the same amount of food, got the same amount of sleep, did the same amount of exercise as our best friend, our sister, our mom, our dad, the physical and psychological difference would be humongous because we are all so unique. Therefore, the food choices that our bodies require in order for us to have energy and do the things that we want to do is going to be unique to every single person, right? We can't all eat the same and have the same outcome because that's not the way that it works. So what are we chatting about? We're going to talk a little bit about, we're obviously going to talk about food and nutrition. I want to really unpack some of the key issues that schools are facing that I've noticed particularly this year and that teachers always say to me, we need support with this. We're going to cover a little bit of puberty. We're going to give you some strategies and there'll be an opportunity for a Q&A as well. But if throughout the course of the presentation, you do have questions, you're so welcome to pop them into the chat. And then I'm sure Lee will let me know what those questions are and we can answer them toward the end. So these are the key issues that schools have noticed, or key themes that schools have noticed since the beginning of this year in particular. I've noticed it. So teens aren't eating breakfast. They don't want to eat at school. There's been an increased prevalence of anxiety and depression. Appearance-based bullying rates are very high. And thankfully, there is increased awareness of support systems available at school, which is amazing. And we need to acknowledge that progress, because for a long time, like, a lot of schools didn't even have like wellbeing as its own separate team, right? It was very much something that was kind of just done by maybe one or two counselors. And the fact that we have teams that are, implementing programs within schools is absolutely fantastic. And I definitely think it's so important that we acknowledge just how incredible what they're doing is. So let's talk about one of the key issues that always seems to be coming up is the obesity epidemic, right? This is something that the government love to harp on about, and childhood obesity, and really putting on like, that this is a major issue and we need to do this and we need to do that. And it is very much attacking young people and making it seem like quite like a shameful thing, right? Making our bodies feel shameful because of the appearance, right? And it's doing something quite damaging, and it's correlating what a person looks like with their health, right? Making judgments of a person's health and well-being based solely off of their appearance, which is just so far from the truth, right? Research has now shown that children as young as 3 years old can have a weight bias. That is that a 3-year-old is able to look at a person and hold beliefs about that person based solely off of the way that they look. Now, if this is starting from the age of 3, it's not too difficult to understand why so many young people are either engaging in appearance-based bullying or changing their bodies in order to prevent being bullied, right? We know that people that exist in larger bodies face far more stigma and discrimination based solely off of their appearance, right? It's just very, very damaging. We also know that people that are bullied about their appearance have lower levels of self-worth. And this is more likely to lead to hyperfixation on their appearance. Young people that are hyperfixated on their appearance are at higher risk for really damaging behaviors. And just so you can get an understanding of just how many young people this is impacting, 7 in 10 say that they have received negative comments or been teased about their appearance, right? These are very, very high numbers. What we see in young people that are really focused on their appearance, we're more likely to see behaviors such as skipping breakfast, dieting and binge eating, fasting, not eating at school, and taking laxatives inappropriately. If we flip the script on that though, and we look at someone who is more health focused, we're more likely to see stable growth and development, higher levels of self-esteem, young people that are in tune with their body's need for rest, healthcare, movement, and comfort, and lower rates of disordered eating and eating disorders as well. So plenty of reasons to want to have our young people be health focused, but not overly health focused, which I will get into. So can we really have health at every size with all of this in mind? So the health industry is very much hung up on the view that being skinny is the ticket to health, and it cannot be further from the truth, right? We have been conditioned to see health as based on solely on the way that a person appears. And the reality is health is not something that you can necessarily see, right? When I was really in my throes of disordered eating, I was complimented on my appearance. A couple of years ago, I went through a massive breakup, moved house, all of these massive changes happening in my life. My body changed as a result of that, and I was complimented on it. On both of those occasions, my physical and mental health were not good at all, right? I wasn't sleeping. I was nauseous. I barely had an appetite. My menstrual cycle had gone on hiatus. Like, I was the lowest in terms of my physical and mental health that I possibly could have been. And yet I was being complimented on the way that my body looked. By that same token, people that exist in larger bodies can actually be far healthier than those that exist in smaller bodies. They might be sleeping through the night, able to manage their daily levels of stress. They might be moving their bodies daily. They might be able to have strong social connections with the people in their lives. These are also all metrics of health that we need to consider. And that's why when we're talking about our young people, and we don't want them to see health as just one particular thing, right? We want it to be something that really is holistic. So let's talk set point for a moment. I mentioned earlier that we are all biochemically unique, right? So when we are born, we come from two sets of like our birth parents, the mum and dad come together to create you, right? And you've got your own unique set of genes. These genes determine things like your eye color, your hair color, whether your hair is curly or straight, whether you're tall or short. It also is correlated with your weight, right? That is part of your genetics. And Lindsay and Lexi Kite, who are two researchers in the area of body image, talk quite a bit about this. People are so quick to change the way that our bodies physically look. But if you actually look at it, like we don't go to exorbitant lengths. For example, if you had really short fingers and you wanted long fingers, we don't see a bunch of people stretching their fingers to make them very long. We accept that that is part of our genetic blueprint. Our weight is the same, right? It is part of our genetic blueprint. And there's this concept called our set point, right? So your set point of weight, of where you're meant to sit, is between 5 to 7 kilos, and that'll go up and down throughout the course of your life. There is no way to like work it out, which I think is a good thing because it allows us to be very intuitive. Like we know when we feel good, we're sleeping through the night, we have energy, we're able to honor our feelings of hunger and fullness. Like all of these are signs that you are sitting at your set point and where your body wants to be. The issues start to happen is when we manipulate that set point. And research has shown, particularly over longitudinal studies, so studies that have spanned over a number of years, that even those who have dieted and kept weight off for up to 7 years, their body is always going to try and gain the weight back. The reason for this is if we're restricting our food intake or engaging in over exercise, our body actually starts to stress out. It thinks that we're in famine and it doesn't realize that we are doing it on purpose. This means that when you do start eating again and moving your body like a normal amount that actually feels really good for you, your body is going to hold on to any nutrients that you take in because it's worried it's going to go into famine again. And it's going to put on even extra because it's worried it's going to happen again. Your body is doing it as a protective mechanism. It's not doing it because it's working against you. It's doing it because it wants to work for you and keep you safe. That's ultimate goal. Like I said at the start, your body wants to keep you alive. You are its prime job. And it takes that job very, very seriously. So this is the point that, my God, I cannot say enough to my young people is even if you ate the same foods, did the same amount of exercise, got the same amount of sleep as your best friend, physical and psychological differences would be humongous. And particularly in the context of when we're talking about food, oftentimes I'll get them to do activities where they're building their lunch boxes or they might be putting together a breakfast. I always encourage collaboration amongst my students. Of course, I think collaboration is fantastic. However, it's not about comparing what one person is choosing compared to another person, right? Because their energy needs are going to be completely different. There are also cultural and traditional factors to take into consideration when we're talking about food as well, right? Food is so much about sharing and connection for so many different cultures, and we need to honor that as part of the picture as well. So, why do we eat? We eat for all kinds of reasons. And I love asking this question to young people. I've been doing a lot of work this month, particularly with years 5 and 6s. And it always makes me giggle because there's always someone who raises their hand. They're like, because we'd die if we didn't eat. And it's very, very true. So there's always the physiological reasons why we eat, right? Obviously, we need to eat for energy, to feel satisfied, to honor our hunger, all of these kind of things. However, as humans, we are also emotional beings. We eat for all kinds of reasons. We eat to satisfy our hunger, obviously, but we also eat for celebration. Many people eat when they're lonely. It's important that we eat to recover from sports, for growth, our ability to concentrate, and our ability to fight off sickness as well. This means that if we only ate because we're honoring hunger, that would mean that we miss out on so many opportunities to connect with other people. You can think of the example of like going to a birthday party, for example, and you might go there and you might be like full when you go to the birthday party. And then it's time for cake and the cake comes out. And all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I could go a piece of chocolate cake. That doesn't mean that you don't eat because you're not physiologically hungry, right? Sometimes we eat because we want to connect and just share in that experience of eating cake and celebrating the person that we're there to celebrate, right? The other reason too is oftentimes we go through really difficult emotions in our life. And for a lot of people, they don't have a massive toolbox of things that they can do to support them with their mental health. And food can be used as a form of comfort in order to support them with that, right? And Is it the best coping mechanism? No, it's not the best coping mechanism. And there are other things that we can do. But this coping mechanism of eating when difficult things come up, it's legal and it's accessible, right? We should never ever shame people for the reasons why they eat, and in turn never make comments about it either, because we really don't know the full picture of anybody's life and what they might be going through. So let's quickly chat puberty, right? Young people from the age of 8 to 18 are going through a beautiful phase of their life called puberty. And as you may remember, it is not something that happens overnight. We don't wake up one morning fully developed. It doesn't work that way. So during this course of time that teens might experience, which you might experience in your classrooms, mood swings, they might have increased prevalence of anxiety and depression, lower levels of self-esteem, they might experience aggression, acne, their smell of their body might change, the shape of their body is going to change, and they might even be a little bit more clumsy as their limbs are growing as well. It's really important during this period of time to make our young people feel secure as possible in their body, right? Because the rate at which teenagers develop is very genetically driven, right? So that means that somebody can enter into puberty being tall and slim, and others can enter into puberty being short and fatter. And that's actually okay. It's very normal to have that variability. However, like I said, there is like a societal perception that one of those is more acceptable than the other, right? And that can be really damaging, because it means that our young people might not be fueling and nourishing their bodies in order to facilitate the changes that need to take place, right? All of the extra energy that they are requiring, right, is needed for growth and development of muscles and bones, their mood and nervous system development, their ability to recover after sports, their ability to concentrate and feel motivation, right? So what the research actually shows is that from pre-puberty to puberty, our young people actually jump 20% in terms of their energy requirements, right? They actually require what's called a positive energy balance. And that means that they actually need to eat more than what they're going to burn off in order for these developmental things to be able to occur, right? If they don't eat enough, that's really going to have an impact on their ability to do all of these things, right? Just to add an extra layer to this, 72% of young people very frequently compare their bodies to their friends. So like I said, puberty is not linear, right? They don't wake up one morning fully developed, and they're all going to develop in their own ways. They actually compare themselves to each other more than they compare themselves to social media influencers, which sits at about 54%, right? So we've got a lot of young people comparing themselves to their peers within the school, right? Just to use a personal example. So my sister and I are 3 years apart. She's 3 years younger than me, and we developed in completely different ways, right? As children, we kind of looked the same, and then we went through puberty, and now we physiologically look nothing alike, right? She's 2.5, she's like a head and a half taller than me, right? And we look so, so different. I actually didn't go through puberty until like year 9, and I thought my body was broken, right? I just did not get the developmental changes that were happening to everybody else until much later. And that wasn't to say that one was right or one was wrong, but I was very much comparing myself to my peers and the way that they were developing. So we need to understand that this stuff is all happening in the background for our young people as well. So we spoke a little bit before about what happens if we manipulate our set point as adults. This is what happens if we start to manipulate our set point as young people, right? We can see deceleration of linear growth, compromised brain development, reduction in bone mineral density, so that is the ability of your bones to become really, really strong, and a delay in puberty onset as well. So we really want to be discouraging our young people from engaging in dieting and all of that kind of thing. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of you are wanting them to do that, but there are influences that are happening online that is very much giving them this rhetoric of this is the ideal of beauty. And this is what you should look like in terms of this is what a strong man looks like. This is what a petite woman looks like. These messages subliminally are encouraging a certain behavior in order to meet that end. And when we can see all of these things that are important developmentally, that are going to hold them instead for the rest of their lives as adults, it's really, really damaging if they start engaging in these, particularly as young people. So how do we know if a young person is struggling with their food, with their relationship with food and their relationship with their body? So now, if they show one of these, it doesn't mean that they're not struggling. If they show all of these, it doesn't mean that they are, right? It's very, very different from person to person. Someone might show one, someone might show all. Some might show none of these and have a completely different sign, right? These are just to give you an example of things that you might be hearing within your school community, right? So a negative relationship with food is often associated with arbitrary food labels. What I mean by that is seeing food as a very black and white thing, right? Labeling foods. So using words like it's healthy, it's unhealthy, it's good, it's bad, it's guilt-free, right? All of these kind of labels around food take them away from calling food what it is, right? It puts a layer of morality onto food, right? I ate this apple. That was a good choice. I am a good person. Or I ate this chocolate cake. That was a bad choice. Therefore, I am a bad person. So equating food choice with morality. The other things to look for are expressions of guilt, either after eating or or choosing not to engage in physical activity, any kind of calorie counting or macro tracking, and using food as a reward and exercise as a form of punishment. Conversely, though, we can see a really positive relationship with food when they just call food what it is. It's like, I'm having pizza, I'm having a burger, I had oats with some yogurt this morning for breakfast, just labeling food and calling food what it is. They have a strong ability to honor their feelings of hunger and fullness because they know that even if they don't eat all the food because they're full, they can come back to it later. They don't have this like all or nothing mentality when it comes to food. They prioritize getting enough food over getting the quote unquote right food, right? This means that they're able to be spontaneous. That means that if a friend messages them and they're like, hey, like, do you want to go get a gelati? They get the opportunity to say, yeah, I'm going to go and get that gelati with them, because not only am I going to eat something delicious, it's also a moment to connect with my friend as well. Again, that link between food and connection is so fundamental. They're able to be flexible, and they're not letting food choices interfere with their ability to live their life, right? They're not making decisions about what they can and can't do based on what food is going to be available, right? So when it comes to diet and food choices, we need to be encouraging our teens to be eating enough to meet their body's high energy demand. That should be number one priority. So often students, and myself included when I was at school, this is their evolution of energy. They eat something, they have high levels of energy, and then come crashing down shortly after. And I did not understand why that was happening to me as a young person, right? Now, obviously, their body is sending them cues to eat more. That is what their body is doing because, again, needs to go through puberty, needs to go through development. However, there is a way that they can eat to have more stable energy levels throughout the course of the day. So I'm not going to go into this in a great deal of detail, but I do want to give you a bit more context and give you a bit of insight as to what could be happening with their energy levels and how that's correlated with their food choices. So we've got our 3 macronutrients. This is basics. This is like 101, right? We've got our carbohydrates, our proteins, and our fats, and they each serve a purpose. So our carbohydrates provide our body with its preferred source of energy, which is glucose. So it gives us the energy to think, and it gives us the energy to do the things that we need to do. Glucose is the only form of energy that our brain knows how to use, right? So even if you're eating foods that are high in protein and high in fats, your body actually has to go through a conversion process to turn that into glucose so that your brain can use it. This is why when we're really stressed, we're engaging in physical activity, our bodies crave carbohydrates. It intuitively knows that our brain needs energy, right? And it cannot be in short supply for our young people. So there are 2 types of carbohydrates. We've got our fast releasing energy carbohydrates and our slow releasing energy carbohydrates, right? So fast releasing energy is typically what our young people are eating at the moment, which is totally fine because, all food is food. We need to enjoy all foods, but there are choices that we can make to have the energy last for longer. Particularly, fast releasing energy is actually really important for our teens, particularly if they're active, right? These are the kind of things that you want to be having before playing sports because it's going to reduce your likelihood of getting a stitch. So having things like honey and rice cakes and jam and pasta, all of those things are amazing. But when we're thinking about engaging in a full day at school, right, where they're going to be required to sit for long periods of time, engage in meaningful discussion, do activities, do assessments, all of these kind of things, we want energy that's going to last for a little bit longer. So having things like oats and porridge, brown rice, potato, corn, pumpkin, whole wheat pasta, popcorn, all of these kind of things are going to help to release energy slowly. In terms of carbohydrates, it's found in pretty much everything except for meat products. So you can find it in vegetables and fruits and dairy products, grains, nuts, and seeds. So the next macronutrient is our protein, right? This is really important for their healthy growth and development. It helps make their blood, their skin and their nails, and it helps them to have energy that lasts. So when we think about that evolution of energy, right, that we have energy, we eat, we have energy, and then it comes crashing down. Protein is actually the nutrient that helps to hold that energy. So when we pair a carbohydrate with a protein, we see energy levels go up and maintain stably across the course of the day, right? So when we're talking about protein, we can get that in the top form of like animal-based proteins. So eggs and chicken and turkey and lamb and beef and Greek yogurt. So if there is having granola for breakfast, right? So, or granola or cereal for breakfast, having that with some Greek yogurt and then maybe even some peanut butter and some other nuts and seeds on top, that protein from those are going to help hold the energy of the cereal so it lasts a little bit longer. My philosophy when it comes to food always, and particularly when I talk to young people, is that it is about what we can add to our diets, right? It's not about what we're taking away from our diets, it's what we can add. So looking at the things that they already enjoy and the things that they already eat and thinking about what they can add to it to have more energy. So then we also have fats as our third and final macronutrient, which is really important for our brain function, keeping us full and satisfied. So that feeling that after you eat a meal, you're like, oh, that was really good. That's what fats do, right? And it's really important for this making it the creation of our cells in our body as well. So having things like cooking with olive oil, avocado, again, having lots of nuts and seeds, that's going to help them to get lots of fats into their diet. So this brings me to fiber. So fiber is found in all like kind of plant-based foods, right? It helps to keep their digestive system active and moving, right? It is so important also for their immune health and also really important for their mental health, which we don't have time to go into here, but making sure that they have enough plant-based food in their diet is really, really important. And water. Oh my gosh. I know a lot of, thankfully, the trend that's coming with like all the fancy water bottles, I would say is actually somewhat of a positive thing because encouraging our young people to drink water is so, so important, right? Particularly if they are also drinking like caffeinated beverages, like we want to break that up with some water, right? So it helps to digest their digestion, ability to make decisions, have fast reaction times and think quickly, execute their skills if they're playing sports, and also for energy production as well. We know what it feels like when we haven't drunk enough water, right? We're dehydrated, we're flat. Imagine if you were chronically dehydrated like so many of these teens are, right? I am always teased by my family. I have this obnoxiously bright drink bottle that is dinted on all sides because, well, my dad said it looks like my first car, which is quite sad because it does look like my first car that didn't get quite the battery. But I bring it with me everywhere and I've been flying quite a bit for work lately. And when I get off the plane, because I don't want to disturb the people around me, I don't drink too much while I'm on the plane. And when I get off, I feel so, so flat until I've drank enough water. So really, really important for our young people. Okay. So I have given you loads and loads of context, right? Which I think is important, right? We need contextual information, but now let's put it into practice because I want to share some things that you can actually implement within your school community that are going to help you with your young people. So these are the key issues that I'm going to be addressing. So young people not eating breakfast, young people not eating at school, body shaming at school, and increased prevalence of disordered eating and eating disorders as well. So we're going to start with the issue of young people not eating before school. This is actually very common, and I've been thankful that I've had some very, very generous students share with me the reasons that they don't eat before school. Now, with the context of everything that we've just spoken about in terms of having long-lasting energy and eating because it's really going to help us to have our energy last, for our ability to concentrate, we can see why young people not eating before school might be an issue. So the two key reasons that young people are constantly telling me why they don't eat at school, one is they don't have time, and two, they don't have an appetite. And when I ask them when they do get an appetite to eat something, most of them say around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. And by that point in time, they are in lesson one and don't have the time, like they don't have the opportunity to eat. So here are some strategies. One is having like a breakfast club opportunity at school, right? Is there a space within the school where they can have a gold coin donation and have some breakfast food available to them to prepare something before school, or they can bring something into school to eat? So having things like a toaster available, a microwave, a mini fridge, or a little pantry where they can donate some money and then that is kind of stocked for them to be able to do that and make their breakfast at school. The other strategy that could work is having flexible eating arrangements. Allowing their young people to bring something into lesson 1 to eat might just change the trajectory of their energy throughout the course of the day. I hear you. We need to have boundaries when it comes to doing this, right? I understand it would be extremely distracting to have like packaging ruffling throughout the session, or some people eating while other young people aren't eating. So this is where you have the power to implement boundaries within the school. You can say, okay, we're going to go through the content of this morning, and then when we're working independently or in small groups, that's when you can get your breakfast out. It's just an option. If these aren't options for your school community, I hear you, I understand. This is where education comes in, right? Are there options that they can have on the way to school that we can teach them about? Can we have some options available to them on the Google Classroom, on Compass, in an email, just to give them a bit of inspiration and get them thinking about it? Things that they can eat on the go, like those squeezy yogurts, a muesli bar, some bliss balls, make some toast at home, bring it in the car, right? Or even having like a box of muesli bars in their locker or in whoever takes them to school's car, so that they can eat something before they get to school, so they're not starving throughout the course of the day. So the next issue is young people not eating at school. This has definitely come up as one of the biggest issues for the year. And I think when we look at the age that so many of the young people are now, a lot of them did go through COVID where they had the opportunity to sit at home and not have other people watching them eat, right? This was like a very insular kind of experience of food. But then when you go to school, it's almost like it's on display. And a lot of young people feel really self-conscious about that. And I've spoken to a colleague of mine who said that it was fine that I could share this information with you. Her name is Margot from Margot's Whole Body Nutrition, and she works with neurodivergent folk to help them build a peaceful relationship with food. So one of the key issues that I've seen come up in schools when teachers engage me, they say the students are saying that it looks gluttonous for them to eat at school. So they're being judged. So they're looking at their body and the way their body looks, and then making judgments on their food choices and correlating the two, right? And then when I spoke to Margot about it, she said there's also issues of like sensory overload as well. And by that, I mean like the rooms are too bright, it's too loud, it's not an environment where they feel comfortable to eat. They might not have their safe foods available to them. They may not be able to eat foods at the temperature or texture that they would like in the school environment. They might have sympathetic nervous system dominance. That basically means that they might be very, very stressed, right? And what happens to some people when they're stressed? They get nauseous. They don't feel like they have an appetite to eat, and that could be happening to them at school. They might not be able to identify feelings of hunger, and eating might not feel safe to them. They may not want people watching them or commenting on their food choices. Okay, so let's talk strategy when it comes to this. The first strategy is to lead with curiosity. This is not about shaming a young person into eating. It is about understanding and allowing the young person to feel seen. So if you do notice that a young person isn't eating at school, this is not an issue to be addressed in front of their peers, right? It is a conversation where you pull the young person aside, and I wouldn't start on the attack about the food. I would more start the conversation of, how are you today? What's been going on for you? And then kind of let that lead the conversation, right? I've been doing some work in a lot of rural communities across Australia, and for a lot of them, there is not that much food available to them. The reason why they may be choosing not to eat at school is maybe because they don't have food within the home environment. So if we automatically jump on the attack and start being like, you have to eat this, you need to eat that, that can really shame that young person and make them feel really, really self-conscious about the food choices, right? And also a reminder when it comes to this, if a young person's food choices aren't just happening in the school environment, right? Just because they're not eating at school, that doesn't mean that their nutritional requirements aren't being met before school and after school, right? Chances are, if they're eating a big breakfast, if they're having a snack after school and having a big dinner, they're likely meeting their nutritional needs across the course of the day. Is it ideal that they're not eating at school? No, it's not. However, them not eating at all is the bigger issue, right? And just approaching the conversations as gently as you can is really, really important. Another strategy that could work here is creating opportunities to share food, because like I've said so many times today, food isn't just about energy. It is a gateway for connection as well, right? The two are very, very linked. Is there a space within the school environment, a classroom, an open area where young people can be invited to connect with one another, where food is kind of just something that you also do? So the attention is not on what they're eating, but the attention is on what they're doing. So could you have like Uno, Connect Four, conversation starters, where they could be engaging in these these kind of activities and also eating at the same time. So the focus is not on the food, but rather on what they're doing. You could also have like a homeroom session on Fridays, where on Friday mornings, you invite everybody to bring their breakfast and you all enjoy it together as part of the classroom. Something that's worked particularly well with young people is they kind of allocate a day of the week where one person in the group will bring some snacks to share. They might bring homemade muffins. They might bring a savory twist from Baker's Delight. They might bring a game to play with one another. Just something that's going to promote connection and draw less attention to food choice, but more so on that opportunity to connect, which will hopefully promote more eating at school as well. So this has come up as one of the most heartbreaking issues in school communities this year, is increased prevalence of body shaming at school. In fact, 77% of our young people have received comments or been teased about their appearance, and majority of them say that this is happening within the school environment, right? 90% of our young people want schools to do more about appearance-based bullying because it is such a huge, huge issue. And when we talk about before about all these things that can happen if they do start manipulating their body or becoming fixated with this kind of content online, it can be really damaging long-term. So where does this come from? Well, we grow up in a society and we live in a society of what's been termed normative discontent, which means it's actually very normal for us to feel bad about our bodies. It's far more possible for you to walk into a conversation and hear people being like, oh, I can't wear this, or this doesn't sit good on me, or oh, I'm so bad, I ate this over the weekend, or I'm so bad, I drank this over the weekend. Our young people hear these conversations and they soak it up, right? It is far less likely for you to walk into a conversation and people being like, oh my gosh, look how good this top looks on me. Look how amazing these shoes are. Look at my hair, it's on point today, right? It is far less likely that they're going to walk into a conversation like that. They are more likely to be introduced to hyperfixation on appearance, but not in a negative way. This is then layered with government initiatives that correlate weight with health. We live in a society that idealizes thinness, and we also have a very normalized culture of making jokes about a person in a larger body. So when we compound all of these things together, it's very, very almost understandable in the saddest possible way that this is such a prevalent issue and that they think it's okay to make comments about other people's appearance, right? So what can we do? Of course, number one is to provide support for the young person who has been bullied. This is super, super important. Having it known within the school where they can go for support, and you cannot tell the young people more, like you cannot tell them enough where to go for support. Multiple times a year, the message needs to be shared. This is wellbeing. These are the people that you can contact. This is the safe contact within the school, right? It is so important that you make that known to them, because the first time you mention it, they may not be going through anything. So that might just go over their head. However, maybe the third or fourth time, something might be happening within their lives and they're like, oh, that's who I need to go to. So create a safe space for them to be able to have those conversations as well. So the next strategy is to call it out, right? Explicitly characterizing body shaming as a form of bullying within the school bullying process. It is super important that our young people know that it is not okay to engage in appearance-based bullying, and that needs to be extremely clear, and appropriate steps need to be taken to address that behavior that could be happening, right? Now, a couple of things with this, it's really important. One is that hurt people often hurt people. Someone who is bullying another young person, that same comment or taunt might have actually been made to them as well. So it is not about shaming the bully. It is about pulling them aside and having a conversation about, why did you make that comment? What made you think that that was appropriate? Because they could have also they could in the past or present be experiencing that kind of bullying themselves. And second is bullying around appearance, particularly in our pop culture sphere and in sporting clubs, is so normalized, right? If it's not happening to you directly, you might not even think it's an issue, right? So really, really important that we have clear understanding of what appearance-based bullying looks like, and clear that the school is not going to tolerate it. Another strategy that you can employ is increasing exposure to body diversity. Because of the algorithmic system of our social media, young people, if they're engaging in a certain type of content, that kind of content will keep getting fed to them, right? So if they're only seeing one type of body type, they may see only one type of quote unquote like good body, right? We need to diversify that within schools as much as possible in the curriculum, in videos that we show them, in educational content of different heights and weights, ethnicities, ability, and neurodiversity as well. This is a great opportunity, right? Tomorrow is the start of the Paralympics. Can we start classes with like a short snippet of a recap of the night before, where we can see just how incredible people's bodies are, that is of different ability to ours and what they can do, so that they can get exposure to different shapes, sizes, abilities, because that is really going to broaden their landscape of what they see as a good body. Hold your comments. This is super important. Teens don't wake up one morning fully developed, like I've said 3 or 4 times, right? It can be super challenging for young people to navigate their changing bodies. So drawing attention to their food choices when they might actually be really hungry is not helpful, right? Again, this is where you have the gentle conversation if you notice something frequently happening and you're concerned, right? And focus on function. Like I said, you have an incredible space and ability within the school community to be able to focus on your function and make it known that you appreciate the little things that your body is doing, right? Your arms for helping you carry your books to class, ears giving you the ability to listen, your legs giving you the ability to walk and run. They may not be receiving these positive messages at home. So it might be a great thing if they're hearing it at school. You might be the only role model in their life that is showing what it looks like to appreciate your body just as it is. So it's an incredible opportunity to be able to do that. So the last issue that I quickly want to touch on is increased prevalence of eating disorders and disordered eating in young people. Now, there can be a number of reasons why a young person develops an eating disorder. It is not like a one size cookie cutter approach. So there is new research to show that there are genetic factors that could be impacting a person's ability. There are psychological factors that make a young person more vulnerable to the development of an eating disorder. So things like perfectionism, low self-worth, those kind of increased anxiety and depression that make them more vulnerable to developing an eating disorder. And lastly is sociocultural factors, which is the one I quickly want to touch on. 2 words, diet culture. I love this definition by Christy Harrison. So diet culture is a system that worships thinness and equates it to health and moral virtue, which means that you can spend your whole life thinking that you're irreparably broken just because you don't look like the impossibly thin ideal. So when I was growing up, diet wasn't a dirty word, right? It was plastered everywhere. But now the wellness industry has got to get very creative. So they say things that also mean diet. They say gut healing, detox, paleo, gluten-free, fasting, clean, all of these words, let's call a spade, a diet. Anything that is restricting caloric intake in pursuit of a physiological look, that is a diet, right? That is restriction. That is doing something that is outside the realms of what their natural body, their set point is, right? And it can be really, really damaging, particularly if they're receiving this kind of messaging online. Because, terrifying fact for you, the term nutritionist is not regulated in Australia. That means that someone can do a 2-week course and call themselves a nutritionist, and someone can do a 4 years bachelor's degree and call themselves a nutritionist. What we learn in 2 weeks is not the same as what we learn in 4 years. I had to do 300 hours of clinical practice in order to be allowed to see clients. I have to do 20 hours every year of continuing professional development in order to maintain my registration. I am not allowed to give health advice online. Then you've got people that do a 2-week course that are not registered to a body that can literally give out health information like it's going out of fashion and not be regulated because they're actually not registered to begin with. One of the most problematic videos that I'm seeing a lot pop up, it used to be more so on YouTube in like 12 to 14-minute videos, and now they're being cut into less than 1-minute clips, is those what I eat in a day videos, where the video starts with a picture or a video of their body, followed by everything they ate during the course of that day. The subliminal message underlying that is if you eat like me, you will look like me. And after everything we've spoken about today, we just know that is fundamentally not true. So what can we do about it? When we speak about food in the classroom, it really, really matters that we are not labeling foods, right? We are not calling foods good, bad, healthy, sometimes treat, naughty. We are not using these words. We are not rewarding our young people for healthy food choices, right? Food is food, and the reasons why we eat and what we choose to eat is so multifactorial that by reducing it to these words really put some foods on a pedestal and make some foods really unworthy. For some young people, they may not have access to the quote unquote good food. What does that say about them, right? And what they're able to access. The focus should be on eating enough, not eating the right food. We need to make sure that we are limiting appearance or food-based compliments, right? At best, these kind of compliments are just accepted by the young person. At the worst, they are actually propelling them to engage in already harmful behaviors in pursuit of further compliments and praise. But model body appreciation. I know this can be really, really challenging in a world where we are told to not like our bodies, but the more that you do it and model that to your young people, that is contagious, right? If you are hyperfixated on that, on your appearance, and you make that obvious to the young people in your life, they can model that behavior and develop that same feeling toward their body. So one last thing before we wrap up, and I go to some questions, is that, like I said before, what we eat, what the young person is eating at school is not likely to be a reflection of their overall dietary intake, right? It's a small snapshot of what they're choosing to eat. The food choices that they make at school might be food choices that are really convenient and that they think that they're not going to be bullied for, right? They might be choosing a lot of simple carbohydrates because they're really stressed and their body feels comfortable to eat those foods at school. That doesn't mean that they don't have a diverse diet outside of the school environment, right? So we're not making comments on people's food choices because it can make them feel really, really bad about themselves. What I would instead encourage you to do is just keep the dialogue open in a safe way, in a safe space for your young people. Ask them how they are, what you can do to support them, and if there's anything that you can do and offer to them to make them their day a little bit better, right? Doing that is going to help the young person feel really seen. Food is just a representation of something else that could be going on in their lives. Oftentimes, it's not about the food at all. It's what's going on with their mental health, in their family environment, in their friendship dynamic. So making the time and space to have those kind of conversations can be very, very valuable. So in terms of the work that I offer presentations and workshops to schools, particularly secondary schools, but I do offer one for year 5s and 6s as well. And we bring stories, activities. We do practical and interactive workshops, so many activities. They are evidence-based, of course, and all aligned with the Victorian curriculum. And I make sure that they are approached with enthusiasm and joy, because I know a lot of these topics can be really heavy, but food can be such a joyful thing as well. And I really make sure that that message really comes through nice and strongly in all the presentations. This is all going to be provided to you after the session, but I do offer a load of different presentations to schools, particularly the Joy of Being Me, which is 2 parts, 1 part on body image, the second part on nutrition. And also let's talk about mental health, because there is such an inextricable link between what we eat and our mental health as well. It's so important that those two are taught, because I think when young people know the why and why food is so valuable and so helpful to them, they're more inclined to make choices to help them to support their overall health and well-being as well. I also work one-on-one with teenagers as well, so to help them build a joyful relationship with food over a 6-week program too.
Students.
So if anybody has any questions, I've got time now to answer any that might have come through in the comments or that you might want to ask now.
Hey, thanks, Angelica. Do you want to stop your slideshow so we can have people back on screen? I'm really mindful that there's people who need to get back into classrooms. And Has anyone got any questions that they'd like to ask? Feel free to take your mic off. I suppose just a starting point for me, teachers are great researchers. They like to look things up. Are there any what resources can you sort of point in the direction, especially probably more, not so much around the nutrition, but that body image, and how teachers can have those conversations with students where they can see that, there are issues starting to really jump up around body image. And we are seeing this in primaries at the moment. So are there any resources that you can sort of discuss, talk to?
Yeah, of course. One of the key ones that I would really like to highlight is the Embrace Collective. I do a lot of work with them as well. It is really real. They are incredible. They offer a bunch of free resources that you can use within your classroom. They even have a body blocks program now, which is available to like kinder to help them start appreciating their bodies from a very, very young age. But they've got lots of resources available there for teachers. They've got PDs, they have books, they have downloadable resources. They're all free. So I would highly recommend going to check that out. So yeah, they would be one of the key ones I would point out for sure.
All right, excellent. No questions from anyone. Can people see the survey I've got up on the screen? Sorry, Oh, yep, I can see people are starting to fill it in. It's just a couple of really quick questions, if you wouldn't mind doing that just while we're chatting. Look, happy for people to leave. Yeah, I suppose what we're seeing at that, certainly that year 5, year 6, is that being able to do some critical literacy around what they're seeing with the wellness industry at the moment. We saw Lighthouse did a study that said 50% of the claims that were made on social media sites in the study they used top sites, said that the information wasn't factual.
Mm.
Is anyone doing any work about creating some learning opportunities for how we can work with critical literacy when it comes to what we're seeing from the wellness area? We're certainly seeing it, and Naomi and I did, in sport with young men was taking supplements to get big. They're a group that we don't often talk about, is the smaller frame kids who are trying to be competitive sport, who are feeling like they've got to get on there and overtrain using supplements. Yeah, that's the piece that for me that's really missing at the moment, is where we can go to find further information around that, so teachers can be well informed around it.
That's becoming very, very prevalent. I've noticed that a lot. Working with, I think, following like psychologists and stuff, I've found particularly helpful for that kind of space, because so much of that really goes within that kind of body dysmorphia space too. And I really do think it's, obviously there's like the food element of it, but I do think it's the mental health element of it as well. And like promoting body acceptance is the key. And we know that promoting body acceptance propels positive health behavior. Like those two are so linked. So unless we appreciate all of what our body can do and our body just as it is, it can be really, really difficult to have that kind of positive relationship with body. So I would say following people like the body image movement and the Butterfly Foundation do a little bit of work on it. Even like Libby Trickett does incredible work with this kind of stuff with young people. So yeah, there would be some awesome resources there. And this is also like everything I spoke about today is through the lens of self-compassion, right? We're not perfect, right? We're not designed to be perfect beings. So, there might be times where you say something that you might have previously said in the past and you're like, oh, shouldn't have said that. That's okay, right? We are only doing our best with the tools that we have. So you have to be kind to yourself in implementing this. It also is going against the messaging that's been going out to us about bodies and food for years and years and years. So it's not something that can change overnight either, necessarily.
One of the things I've been talking to some young students about is having a look back at some of the athletes they admire. If we're talking about, and I'm talking about a specific group, is the young kids in the classroom, that their body development at that age was very different to what it looks like now, that it's not something, they weren't born this shape. They actually started off, and Cam McAvoy's story is a great one for anyone who's working with young boys, especially who really want to be top athletes, to look at the size and the shapes and the changes that happen with age. But yeah, certainly really getting some critical literacy around what they are seeing. I think one of the points that Jel brought up was which was really important, was the first thing these kids are doing when they're waking up in the morning is getting online. So that's what's informing their day. And so if that, getting kids to have a look at who have they following in their For You pages, things like that, because that's what's informing how I'm going to feel about myself today. The recent study that came out around, I think it was TikTok, that Rachel Rudd did out of Charles Sturt, saying that just watching 8 minutes of content a day is enough to shift somebody's sense of self. Yeah. Most of our kids, I would hazard a guess, just in my sort of 15 years, are doing at least 8 minutes a day before they're even starting their day, which is informing what their sense of self is. So as teachers, it's a really tricky time. You pumping up tires as soon as kids are walking into the classroom for probably at least a quarter of the kids. And I mean, big shout out to the teachers who are balancing all that work, but starting to think about what is that child walking into. We used to just worry that they were having breakfast, but now we're worrying that they've already done that 8 to 10, up to 30 minutes. Some kids have done at least an hour on tech before they get to school, which is informing who I am, how I fit in with the world, and then I'm comparing myself to my peers. So, taking the time to pull that apart is a big gig. Look, thanks for coming. I'm gonna sort of wrap this up. This is the starting point in this. So we started off with this nutrition into body image, how it works in the classroom. We're going to get other speakers to come in as well to look at the body image side of this a little bit more closely and continue this part of our theme for next year as well. What you write in your feedback will really inform what that is. So please take that time to have a look at that. If you haven't had a look, we've got Naomi, big shout out to Naomi and Foxy, who's enjoying a little bit of self-care over at Maggie Beer this weekend, having the time of her life. And I did see the message that she wasn't returning, Naomi. So this is all on you now. Who's our next speaker?
Our next speaker is Dr. Connie from Social Stencil, and she'll be talking about those issues that happen within social situations and give you tips on how to get some of that social skills stuff going. So we'll get that out to everybody in the next, probably before the end of term, so everybody knows what's going on with that next speaker.
Yeah, really big topic for schools. Angelica, on behalf of BATForce and our region and the schools that we invite into our sessions, thanks heaps for being part of this today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. BATForce is committed to 4 PDs, 4 schools this year, but we've got thrown in an additional one thanks to some funding from the Anthony Costa Foundation. So if you haven't seen it, it's on our socials. There's a free snapshot PD pop-up around what we've learned from working with students over the last 14 years around their online worlds. Some pretty interesting information's come out of those sessions. So feel free to share that with people in your networks. It's an afternoon session. We're trialing a different time, but the topic is something that we're hoping we'll get a few along too. So it's in our socials. It'll go out again, as the others will, when Naomi sends out the information from this. So enjoy your day. Thanks to those. We've got a few surveys filled in. Thank you so much for that. And have a lovely day and enjoy the sunshine that apparently is coming at some point. Thanks, everyone.